Welcome back to MidPoint. The Director of Studies at the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation in Paris, France, John Laughland, joins us. John, before we took the break, you mentioned the book that was published today. The book is a novel by Michel Houellebecq, and it imagines the election by the French in 2022 of an Islamic regime headed by a Muslim president. Already in the news today, there have been some people who have come out and said that this author is nothing more than an agitator who manipulates other people's fears and feeds a new civilized racism. Is it not fair to say now that in light of what has happened today, the politically correct, as you have called them, they've ignored this far too long? This is going to be shoved in their face, and people are going to tell these peace-seers, it's time for you to live in the real world and understand that there are killers out there in the midst of people in every community that would be very happy to see more blood spilled on their streets around the world.
Ed, Charlie Hebdo itself ridiculed this book in its front page edition, the one that's currently on the newsstands. The magazine where journalists were murdered in cold blood today itself is a politically correct magazine, which itself particularly attacked this book and made fun of the author, saying that he was a scaremonger and an idiot. You couldn't wish for a more terrible, bloody symbol of the inadequacy of this politically correct ideology. In Germany, there have for several weeks now been demonstrations, spontaneous demonstrations in Dresden against the Islamization of the West. And those demonstrations have been routinely denounced by the entire political and media establishment of Germany as being scaremongering. You're absolutely right in your question. This is the end now of this kind of talk. The problem is, and I say this to an American audience, is that the rhetoric against terrorism, which of course needs to be not only strong but also backed up by actions, has unfortunately been exploited, particularly under the previous president, George Bush Jr., but also to some extent under Obama, to wage interstate wars which have absolutely nothing or very little to do with the problem of radical Islam at home. In a sense, they have made the situation worse. When Britain and America were engaged in Iraq and Afghanistan, Gordon Brown, the British Prime Minister, used to justify those engagements by saying that they were needed to prevent terrorist attacks in Britain. Well, we've seen that that policy is failing. It could never work, and it has obviously failed. So there needs to be a revision of policy, both on the politically correct side and also on the hawkish neocon side in Britain and America.
John, a couple of minutes that we have left here, though. Let's look at the other side of this, the fear factor now, because 10% of the Parisian population is Muslim. And I would imagine right now that there are people who are looking to rise up against that population. We have to say this flat out. There's a lot of people who live there who likely are very peaceful, do not believe in the killing of infidels, if you will. But are we not looking at the possibility of a flashpoint here where there is going to be such a drastic snapback, if you will, against anybody who practices Islam, that we could be looking at a very bloody time, not only in Paris, but in other countries around the world who fear this Islamization and take out the innocents instead of the guilty?
That's not my fear right now. I don't think that there is that kind of sentiment against Muslims generally. It may come. I don't rule it out. It may be possible, and I think it could happen anywhere in Europe, or anywhere in the democratic West for that matter. I don't think it's a particular danger now. But of course people will be frightened. Of course they will be worried. And of course they will be asking themselves questions. They will be asking the questions that we've been asking just now in our debate. They will be understanding above all that political correctness is finished and that the actual presence, as you indicate in your question, of these millions of Muslims, not just in Paris, but all over Europe, the actual physical presence of these people itself represents a severe challenge, even if, of course, as we know, these people are, in the vast majority, peaceful citizens. The fact is that they're a reservoir in which a small minority of dangerous fish can swim.
I've got about 30 seconds left. Have we not reached the point right now where, as I've said this many times, the peaceful Muslims of the world need to rise up. They need to let their voices be heard. They need to be the ones who are out there on the front line, not just everybody else demonstrating, but they need to be fighting against those people of their own religion who create the aura, if you will, of nothing but wanton killers.
Well, to be fair, they have been actually. You know, Muslim leaders have been among the first here in Paris to denounce this attack. One of them has even visited the site of the attack. They have tried. My fear is that they can't contain this. My fear is that the message of violence is contained in Islam, and that, of course, the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful and all the rest of it, that we know. But I think it's more difficult to argue, as is often claimed, that Islam is quite simply a religion of peace. I personally don't buy that. I think that these attempts by Muslim leaders to contain this issue are likely to prove futile.
We're going to have to stop it right there, but John, you've opened up another discussion for another day. John Laughland, thank you so much for your time and your comments from Paris, and MidPoint will continue covering this developing story.